I'm just going to kick it into high gear. Welcome, everybody. My name is Nick Merriam, and I am the CEO of sea.citi. We are a network of tech and innovation companies doing community and civic engagement together. And we do this work because there are more than 300,000 people working in the tech industry here locally. And we want to make sure that all of you folks get some of the best information possible about what's going on really in the local community landscape. We do these events. We also have been doing a fair amount of work around digital equity lately. And if you want to find out more information about that digital equity work, I really encourage you to either take a look at our website, which Luanda will drop it into the chat. There's some interesting information about some of that work. And you can also read our op-ed that was published in the Seattle Times earlier this week about the work that we've been doing with Seattle Public Schools. So we do these Roadmap to Recovery events. We've taken a break over the summer, and we are super excited to be back now that fall has come in and people are getting more settled into their school and work routines. This week, we are talking with Abel Pacheco from Sound Transit. And he is the government and community relations manager there for the Central Corridor, which is mostly Seattle. If you don't know Abel, he first is a really great guy, and so we're really glad to have him here. He served as a city council member and represented District 4 during 2019. He's also worked for the Seattle Police Foundation, the University of Washington, and completed a fellowship over at the Seattle Foundation. He's a graduate of Daniel J. Evans School of Public Policy and Governance at the University of Washington and is a renter in Ravenna. He is a car-free Seattleite and passionate about ensuring that our community has a robust transportation network to ensure that Seattle remains a great place to live, work, and visit. So with that, Abel, really nice to have you here. Welcome. I'd love for you to just jump on in and give us a quick overview of Sound Transit.
Sure. So Sound Transit is a regional body made up of a regional transportation agency that has an 18-member board. They're made of elected leaders from throughout Pierce, King, and Snohomish. We operate not just the light rail, but we also have the buses, and we partner with Metro, Community Transit, Pierce Transit to operate some of our bus service as well. We have some exciting news. I'll kind of give where we are right now in terms of an agency. Next year in September 2021, we're excited to open up our Northgate extension. That will add 3 additional lines in the U District, Roosevelt, and Northgate. Then we'll be following up that opening with another opening of the Linwood Link, which would further extend our existing system, and then we'll be following that up with our East Link extension opening. And so that will finally connect Bellevue to Seattle. Right before the quarantine and COVID hit, if you all might remember, we had closed at the Pioneer Square Station the track so that we could connect East Link to the current Central Link. So that's the exciting part of Sound Transit and where we are right now. But obviously in this current environment, we're thinking about as an agency, and our board is thinking about how can we ensure rider safety for those who are essential workers, being a priority and protecting them and making sure that they're safe. And so we've started pilots like face mask pilots so that we can try to get to 100% compliance, as well as we've brought in cleaning specialists who can ensure that we have the highest standard in terms of cleaning during COVID. We also have, we're testing the feasibility to provide hand sanitizer. I had prepared some slides, so I was trying to go without the slides. We have, we're trying to increase our passenger communications as well. Next slide, or next couple slides. And so the real difficult conversation, and where I've spent a number of my time lately is trying to work with our board in terms of having the discussions about what COVID has done to our revenues. As you all see on the slide, the majority of our revenue comes from tax funds. And so right now we have been hurt by the current economic recession that we're in. And so that has led to a conversation for us as an agency of how we can realign our program. And by realigning our capital program, how can we ensure that we can best meet our needs that voters had approved and supported in ST3. If you want to go down a few slides, just 2 slides. And so in terms of our near-term priorities, we've really talked about how can we ensure that projects stay shovel ready. Shovel ready is a term that came over from the Obama administration. And so if there is federal aid that comes down the future, how can we ensure that we have that flexibility as well? And then how can we ensure that the projects we have, that we have committed to in the stages that we're in, we can continue to advance them as best so that the board can make those near-term decisions. Again, we don't want to overcommit financially because the loss of revenue, really it's a pinch point in 2028. And so by the time that we reach that pinch point, we want to make sure that we have gotten a good direction from our board in terms of how we're going to move forward. And so our board has 8 tools, several tools to help us address how we're going to manage affordability. Look down a couple of slides. And so what the board has approved this summer is thinking about how the criteria for how they would evaluate projects and reevaluate the projects. The criteria is listed there, but I'll just speak briefly to the probably 2 or 3 of them that I think I draw a bit of interest from folks. Ridership potential. So one of the things that we're trying to work with our partners as well as just with other transportation agencies is thinking about how COVID and post-COVID the environment for us will be. And so that's one that we are taking a long view approach of ridership potential and ridership potential around our stations. Currently, as with the height of the highlighting of racial injustices right now, we're really taking a hard look in terms of what does it mean for our socioeconomic equity for riders and for the communities that we serve within the 3 counties in the Puget Sound. What we've seen is not just a drop in ridership, but we have seen the least amount of drop in ridership coming from certain neighborhoods or areas within the Puget Sound, and those have been communities of color, low-income neighborhoods where they have, while we may have the opportunity to work from home, they may not have had the opportunity to be at working from home. Another one that is, I think, of top of mind for folks is tenure. Sound Transit has been able to build out its system, and in building out its system, we are the activation of Northgate, for example. That's an ST2 project, not an ST3 project. But there are projects that we included in ST3 and voted for in support of ST3 that were kind of a leftover from ST2 because of the last recession that we were not able to complete for voters. And so don't want to spend too much time on all the criterias, but this really has been more of what on a high level of what we're doing in terms of having those discussions as a board, as the board has a discussion and our executive leadership team has a discussion about how we're going to respond to the loss of revenue from COVID and the economic recession we're in right now. And then I want to give a quick call to action to just how people can get involved. Sound Transit is, sorry, let me pause real quickly. The realignment process is such that it is ongoing and it will continue into the summer of next year. And so you will probably be reading about in the paper of how Sound Transit is managing and making those decisions and the discussion that's had at the board with making those decisions so that we could realign our program in a way that meets our financial constraints. And so those final decisions will happen in summer of next year. But if you want to get involved, of course, I encourage civic engagement, and I'm a big advocate for folks to be involved, especially young folks and tech workers, because I think it's, there's always more that we can do. And I think there's definitely a big call to action right now in terms of what can we do outside of voting and potentially contributing to causes that we care about. So there's a citizen oversight panel board that we have representation and open spots for folks in King County, Snohomish County, and Pierce County. So if you're interested in serving on the Sound Transit Oversight Board as a community citizen, I'll be sure to follow up with that information so that you can be involved and be a part of this discussion that Sound Transit has in terms of both engagement and being responsive to our board needs. So that was, try to do that in 5 minutes. Hopefully it wasn't too much long.
Great, thanks, Abel. That was fairly comprehensive. So one thing I just really want to dive into just for a brief second, and yes, I'm already going off our script that we agreed to. But you touched on ridership, and I think it was sort of a little bit passing, but a lot of us that are sitting here on this call right now are fortunate enough to still have jobs or be working from home or have sort of figured out things for ourselves, and it may not be relying on transit right now. I know I used to take the bus sort of every day out of Shoreline downtown. That's completely stopped. How is Sound Transit seeing, talk to us a little bit about ridership. I mean, who are you seeing normal ridership levels in certain areas, but not other areas? What does overall ridership look like? And how do fares factor into the potential budget constraints?
So I'm gonna break down my question in terms of ridership and what we've seen. At the height of the pandemic, we saw ridership decline 87%. Those numbers have gotten slightly better, but it averages about 80% decline of what our previous levels were to quarantine and the COVID environment. Now, where we've seen less of a drop has been on our communities in the South End. And so, that has been something that we have noticed, that we're folks and coming from the North End, for example, like the University of Washington Station, or some of the Sound Transit buses that stop in the North Seattle area have not seen as much, or sorry, they've seen the greatest drop of riders. Now, in terms of fares, we're currently not collecting fares. Part of quarantine and COVID, we stopped collecting fares. We started collecting fares again about a month ago, and we are currently our fare enforcement officers are just asking if you have an ORCA card if you're stopped by a fare enforcement. And so, but they're not, because we're trying to limit interaction physical interaction between both our employees and our contractors with passengers. It's something that we have just try to show your ORCA card as proof of payment.
Got it. Okay. And sorry, I'm not remembering back on the slide, but what percentage of overall revenue is fares normally? It's a really low percentage, isn't it?
It's 7%.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So can you, coming back to sort of how you guys are thinking about the realignment work that will sort of be forging forward over the next couple of months towards next summer, can you just talk us through what the life cycle of any project is that you're working on?
Yeah, so we go through, a triangle process for us, which is our Department of Planning and Engineering first takes the process of planning and doing the engineering work, the design work for working with the cities to get the necessary requirements before a project then moves over to construction. And so that process and at each stage in the process, our board approves and continues to approve so that there's oversight through our project process until it finally becomes operational and it gets to the final leg of the triangle. In operation, that's when we're, all of us get to benefit of being able to ride on the light rail. And so, I happen to sit in the middle of the triangle within GCR, government community relations, so that I can try to work with communities as well as the city of Seattle and the various departments within the city to ensure that we meet the scheduled deadlines and make sure that the projects stay within budget.
How are those conversations going right now in light of COVID?
Those are always fun conversations. Just because, there's always, every city is different, and there's the city of Seattle is our central corridor, which is obviously, I think within the Puget Sound, there's a high emphasis of both in terms of the importance of the system and how it goes through Seattle and so forth to connect to other cities. So it's fun. I mean, it's a fun time. But I wish I've been trying to go and take my walks outside. Let's put it that way.
Well, I would imagine your last year as a city council member definitely helped aid in some of those conversations and relationships. So it's not like they're cold relationships or cold calls. So that's great.
I'm not doing cold calling. It's not cold call sales.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, we had a question come in from the audience about masks, and their question was really around how you enforce mask compliancy. And they do note that they've talked to customer service before about this, and that there hasn't been any sort of movement yet to make sure that masks are compliant while on Sound Transit. Can you talk to that?
So again, we really have tried to encourage riders, and we want to get to 100%. We're currently at 81% coverage, or compliance of face masks. We were doing everything we can to ensure that riders not only have the information and the education of the importance of wearing a face mask, but we're also trying to, pilot at different stations and give away free face masks. And so we've been trying to work with community organizations as well in terms of trying to distribute those face masks so that they're not cost prohibitive for a rider.
Got it. To whoever had that question, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to just shoot them over to Luanda. One thing that we really try and do with these events is really talk about how our public and community-based institutions are addressing racial equity. And I'm just going to keep this really broad for you to just talk a little bit about how is Sound Transit right now thinking about racial justice in transportation. And maybe there's components around fares or fare enforcement that you want to talk about, or prioritization of locations. I know I saw that back in the Matrix, but would love you to dive a little bit deeper in on it.
Yeah, so two areas that I think have gotten quite a bit of attention and awareness from Sound Transit are how we do fare enforcement. And so one of the things or several things, the staff went through a process from 2019 to early 2020 of making a series of recommendations of how Sound Transit could reform its fare enforcement policies. Our board was scheduled to vote in early spring due to both COVID and additional staff, a request for staff to do additional work. The board has not yet voted or approved those changes. The other part of that conversation in terms of how we can still be proactive is work that I've been helping to lead with King County Metro, Seattle Public Schools, and some of the other school districts in terms of right now, as we look into back to school, school's getting ready to start, how to make sure that for youth, both we have awareness as an agency of how we can best engage youth, as well as make sure that they have the resources, even in this COVID environment, getting their Orca cards and how we're partnering and strengthening that partnership with school districts and Metro and Sound Transit. The other part there's been several organizations that have been leading a lot of work in terms of highlighting the socioeconomic injustices that are occurring. One of those organizations has been King County Equity Now, and Sound Transit, obviously, in the life cycle of a project, has to acquire a lot of land, and so in one of the exciting projects that we get to work on is what we then do when we're done with the project or have gone through the community to build the project, how we can return the property back to the community that which we serve. So King County Equity Now has asked Sound Transit to work with them in the city, or work with the county and county leadership in terms of building the Youth Achievement Center. And so it's something that not myself, but my counterpart, because the city of Seattle is so big and there's so many issues to track. She's been really doing a tremendous job of trying to work with the community-based organization, King County Equity Now, in terms of how we can best align both our goal of returning the property and as well as what the community desires are, which are to build a Youth Achievement Center.
Interesting. You know, one thought that just occurs to me that I know I've seen happen in Shoreline is upzoning, and there was substantial upzoning in preparation for the Shoreline stations at 145th and 185th, and it strikes me that because these are along freeways, that some of those upzonings do provide potential benefit to folks that may not have been able to afford, space away from the freeway, but rather they are living right next to the freeway. And I mean, do you see any other activity like that going on around upzoning and how communities might benefit from upzones?
Yeah, when voters voted to approve Sound Transit 3, they voted to also help us ensure that we can help be partners with cities in creating affordable housing near transit. So, and we have state requirements as well in the disposal of the property. And so, we're right now going through a process. We just opened up, did the grand opening for First Hill development. We have worked with Capitol Hill Housing. So if you look at around Capitol Hill, a lot of that housing that's adjacent to the station used to be Sound Transit property. So we work with nonprofit developers so that we can return that property and provide the discount that would be necessary to make sure that project worked for affordable housing. So we try to do that in balancing our portfolio of interests and how we can really connect those most vulnerable and those most impacted to ensure that they have access to not just reliable transit, but also affordable housing as well.
Cool. Thanks for that additional detail on that. So we are quickly coming to the end of our time, but I would be very remiss if we didn't talk about the West Seattle Bridge. So West Seattle Bridge, we all know, is not in great shape these days. Is there opportunity for Sound Transit to step in here and help sort of expedite the West Seattle light rail station? Sort of what's going on with that? This is also a participant had this question as well as us having this question.
Pre-COVID, Sound Transit was scheduled to open up the West Seattle station in 2030. And so, we're still progressing on that timeline as currently. The West Seattle Bridge itself, High Bridge, is owned and operated by and maintained by the city of Seattle. The city of Seattle has expressed interest in terms of potentially, and we've heard from community members of calls for, hey, can we merge the two needs and calls for, or the two needs of the bridges into one bridge so that, and potentially be a partner with the city. The city is currently going through its own process of deciding what they will do in terms of either repairing and maintaining the bridge or replacing the bridge. And those conversations are led by SDOT. And so we're going through that. They're going through that process. And so as we still independently go through our own process. And so all I can say is that we've heard community desires and we acknowledge them. And so it becomes a question of where can we potentially, if it's possible, if we can collaborate on it.
Well, with that, we'll pause our conversation right there and just say a really big thank you to you and to Sound Transit for both the work that you're doing and for showing up today to talk with us. For all the folks that are still on the line, I know we've lost a couple of you. We will be making a recording of this event available on our website. We also normally do some blog write-ups. So you can always catch up there. Next week, we are going to be talking to the Chief of Staff of King County Elections, a very, very hot topic these days, which I'm not sure I agree that elections or election security should be a hot topic. But besides that, we're going to take a peek into elections and how that process gets managed. Thank you all so much for coming. You can expect to see an email from us with some of the items that Abel mentioned, as well as more information that you can follow up on. We really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful Thursday and enjoy the long weekend. Thanks.
Take care, everybody.